Part 1. When you remember, they lose everything. It began in complete darkness. Not the kind of darkness that surrounds you, but the kind that becomes you, the kind that makes you forget. I was on the floor, trembling, spiraling through a storm of thoughts that didn't feel like mine. Something inside me was screaming for truth, for light, for oxygen. It wasn't depression. It was a deep spiritual suffocation. And that's when I realized I had been living in a reality that was never mine. A matrix of survival, of fear, of control. I had mistaken it for life. And that was the trap. We've been conditioned to believe that this 3D world is all there is. Structured time, linear thinking, systems of hierarchy, scarcity and separation. That's the architecture of the third dimension. You wake up, you perform, you please, you produce, you survive. But what no one tells you is that this reality is a program. And the moment you begin to question it, to feel its falseness, to see the cracks in its walls, you become dangerous. Not to humans, but to entities, to forces that have fed off your forgetfulness for eons. The shift to 5D consciousness is not a trend. It's not a spiritual buzzword. It's a return to original awareness. It's remembering the truth behind the veil, that you are not your body, your thoughts, or your trauma. You are pure awareness. You are divine intelligence. You are a multidimensional being who agreed to play the game of forgetting so you could master the art of remembering. And when you begin to remember, demons panic because their power only exists in forgetfulness.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
What is 5D consciousness? It's the frequency of unconditional truth, unconditional love, and divine neutrality. It's not about escaping the world. It's about seeing through it. It's about standing in the middle of chaos and being untouched. It's when you stop reacting and start responding. When you stop judging and start observing. When you stop identifying with your thoughts and start witnessing them. That shift is seismic. Because the moment you realize you are not your fear no longer has a home. Demons don't fear your strength, they fear your awareness. Because awareness is what unplugs you from the matrix. Awareness is what breaks the contracts you didn't even know you signed. Contracts rooted in guilt, shame, unworthiness, and ancestral trauma. When you shift to 5D, you start seeing those contracts clearly. You see how every time you chose silence over truth, you were feeding something. Every time you chose fear over love, you were offering energy to something that never had your best interest in mind. And here's the secret: these entities don't feed on your pain. They feed on your identification with it. They feed on your belief that you are your wound, your trauma, your failure. But in 5D, you stop identifying with the wound and start embodying the healer. You stop seeking salvation and start becoming it. You realize that healing is not something you find, it's something you remember. You remember that you were never broken, only buried. Have you ever wondered why the moment you start to wake up, life seems to test you harder? Why your relationships begin to fall apart, your body reacts, your mind rebels? It's not punishment, it's purification. Because everything that isn't aligned with 5D must fall away. Not because it's evil, but because it's expired. And demons hate that. They hate when you let go, because attachment is their gateway. They live in the energy of clinging to identity, to ego, to limitation. When you release that, you evict them. In the third dimension, power is external. It's about control, domination, validation. In 5D, power is internal. It's about embodiment. It's about becoming the vibration you used to reach for. It's about recognizing that your presence is your protection, that your frequency is your fortress, that your light is not just illumination, it's a weapon, not a weapon of destruction, but of revelation. Because when you walk into a room anchored in 5D, everything false begins to tremble. Demons cannot manipulate someone who no longer needs approval. They cannot tempt someone who no longer seeks outside fulfillment. They cannot deceive someone who has made peace with their shadow. And this is what terrifies them. Because the 5D human is not just awakened, they are integrated. They are sovereign. They are multidimensional. They are no longer playing the game. They are rewriting it. Ask yourself something now and be brutally honest. What part of you is still negotiating with fear? What part of you still believes you need to earn your worth, prove your value, or compete for love? That's where your consciousness is still anchored in 3D. And that's okay, because awareness is the first step. When you see it, you can shift it. When you shift it, you break resonance. And when you break resonance, demons lose access. This is why 5D isn't a place, it's a state. It's not something you visit in meditation and leave behind. It's something you live. It's how you eat, speak, love, breathe, walk. It's how you meet conflict. It's how you hold space for pain without becoming it. It's how you choose presence when escape is easier. Every moment you choose to respond from your higher self, you deepen your roots in 5D. And with each root, your field becomes clearer, stronger, untouchable. But make no mistake, this path is not easy. Because everything in the 3D world is designed to pull you back into reaction, back into fear, back into the illusion that you are separate, small, and powerless. The media, the education system, the financial world, they are all constructs of the third dimension. And when you begin to unplug, you will be tested, you will be mocked, you will be misunderstood. That's the cost of awakening. But the reward, freedom, clarity, sovereignty, and the end of spiritual manipulation. Demons fear the 5D human because the 5D human cannot be controlled. They cannot be emotionally hijacked. They cannot be guilted into submission or shamed into silence. They are clear. They are compassionate without being codependent. They are forgiving without being foolish. They are loving without needing to be liked. And that level of consciousness breaks systems: spiritual, emotional, societal. You see, demons are not just spirits. They are patterns, programs, frequencies. And when you shift into 5D, those frequencies no longer match yours. You stop becoming a host. You stop being a battery. You stop being a puppet. And in that moment, you don't just free yourself, you tear a hole in the matrix. You become a portal for others to walk through. You become a mirror that reflects what is possible. And that is what they fear most. Part 2. The death of control while your light dismantles their kingdom. There is a war happening, But it's not the kind we were taught to fear. It's not a war for your money, your possessions, or even your body. It's a war for your perception. Because once your perception shifts, once you begin to see through the veil of illusion, you become unmanageable. You step out of the simulation of fear and into the field of truth. And for demons, for energetic parasites, that shift is catastrophic. Because their entire survival depends on one thing: your agreement with limitation. We were born into a system that taught us to doubt our own intuition. Think about that. From the time we were children, we were trained to look outside ourselves for answers. To believe that authority lived in someone else, in books, teachers, institutions, and eventually in technology. But 5D consciousness reverses that programming. It reclaims the inner compass. It says, you are the authority. You are the truth. You are the channel. And that kind of sovereignty destroys every structure built on spiritual dependency. Demons thrive in dependency. They don't need your fear if they already have your loyalty. They don't need to possess you if they can influence you through unhealed trauma, inherited beliefs, or unconscious agreements. But here's the truth. In 5D consciousness, you stop outsourcing your power. You stop looking for saving and start embodying salvation. You stop praying to be rescued and start realizing that the divine lives inside your breath. That realization is not poetic, it's nuclear. Because when you remember who you are, you begin to emit a frequency that is incompatible with control. You start to feel when energy is off. You walk into a room and sense manipulation before words are even spoken. You hear the distortion in people's voices, in political speeches, in spiritual teachings, and you become a detector of lies, not from judgment, but from clarity. And clarity is what the dark cannot stand. We must understand something deeply. Demons are not powerful in themselves. They are powerful only in proportion to our unconsciousness. They are not creators. They are hijackers. They hijack thoughts, emotions, narratives. They ride on frequencies we emit when we're not fully present. But in 5D, presence becomes your default. You are no longer driven by past or future. You operate from now. And the now is where demons dissolve. They can't survive your gaze. And I don't mean physical sight, I mean spiritual gaze. The moment you see them without fear, without projection, without resistance, they begin to disintegrate. Because they feed on attention wrapped in fear. But when your attention is wrapped in love, in truth, in neutrality, they have no grip. Have you ever stared into the eyes of your own pain and realized it wasn't as big as you thought? That's what happens when you meet darkness from 5D. You see it for what it is, a distortion, not a destiny. But to get there, you have to be willing to let old versions of you die. The ego will resist. The mind will panic. The body may even rebel. Why? Because the 3D self was built on survival. It was built in reaction to trauma. It was built to fit into a system that was never designed for your expansion. So when you begin to shift into 5D, everything that was built on fear must collapse. And that collapse is terrifying until you realize what's waiting on the other side. Peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of clarity. The kind of peace that can hold chaos without becoming it. That can witness pain without drowning in it. that can walk through fire and not be burned. That's the peace of the awakened. And that's the peace demons cannot counterfeit. Because it doesn't come from bypassing, it comes from integration. Integration is the key. You don't escape your shadow in 5D, you embrace it. You don't deny your pain, you dialogue with it. You don't run from your fear, you breathe through it. And every time you do, you collapse another stronghold. Demons don't fear religion. They don't fear rituals. They don't even fear your prayers if those prayers are rooted in fear. What they fear is integration. Because integration is the end of their kingdom. You must ask yourself, what parts of me have I labeled as unworthy of love? What emotions have I exiled? What memories have I buried? These are the places where you are still fragmented. And fragmentation is where they feed. But when you pull those parts back in, when you say, even this is worthy of light, you become whole. And wholeness is the frequency of 5D. There's a reason why certain people, situations, or energies fall away when you shift. It's not rejection, it's recalibration. Your field becomes so aligned that anything misaligned simply cannot stay. And yes, that can feel like loss. But it's actually liberation. Because what's falling away is not your path, it's your programming. In 5D, you stop needing to be understood. You stop arguing with illusion. You stop convincing people to see what they're not ready to see. You conserve your energy. You speak only when guided. You retreat when necessary. You become surgical with your presence. And that kind of precision is terrifying to the entities that once fed on your chaos. They can no longer predict you. You're not reacting from wounds. You're responding from wisdom. You're not seeking validation. You're standing in revelation. You're not consuming to fill a void, you're creating from overflow. That's what 5D consciousness does. It turns you from a seeker into a source. And once you embody that, you become untouchable. But don't mistake untouchable for invincible. You will still feel. You will still cry. You will still be human. But you won't be ruled by any of it. You will feel without attachment. You will love without losing yourself. You will serve without savior complexes. And you will walk through this world as a beacon, not because you're trying, but because you've remembered. Can you imagine what your life would look like if you stopped living in reaction to fear? What would shift if you no longer made decisions based on survival, but based on soul? That's the gateway. That's the portal. And every time you choose alignment over approval, expansion over safety, truth over comfort, you step deeper into 5D. Demons lose their grip not because you destroyed them, but because you changed the game. You stopped playing small. You stopped believing the lie. And that's the most radical act of spiritual warfare you could ever commit, remembering who you are. Part 3. The frequency that ends their reign. There comes a moment in your evolution when you stop negotiating with your old self. You stop bargaining with your fear, stop apologizing for your light, and stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold your truth. This is the moment when 5D consciousness stops being a concept and becomes your core operating system. And when that shift happens, when it's no longer something you visit during meditation, but something you are, everything that once had power over you begins to crumble. Because demons don't fear your rituals. They fear your radiance. They fear your embodiment. In 5D, you no longer chase safety, you become safety. You no longer seek validation, you emanate certainty. You no longer try to manipulate outcomes, you surrender to alignment. And when you live like this, you are no longer useful to the systems that feed on your fear. You don't play the game, you transcend it. You don't rebel against the matrix, you exit it completely. And that's when the real power begins to flow through you. Demons, parasites, energetic distortions, whatever name you give them, they do not fear your power. They fear your remembrance of it, because power without remembrance is chaos. But power with remembrance, that's divine weaponry. That's the frequency that ends their reign. That's the vibration that doesn't just repel darkness, it dismantles it. Because it's not reactive, it's not emotional. It's pure, integrated, sovereign presence. And there is nothing more threatening to the false than a being who no longer needs to be believed to be certain. People ask, how do I protect myself spiritually? But the better question is, why do you believe you need protection at all? If protection implies threat, it implies vulnerability. But in 5D consciousness, you are not a victim of energetic warfare. You are the architect of your field. You are not defending yourself against the dark. You are radiating so brightly that darkness cannot enter. You don't need to fight what cannot even touch your frequency. You simply need to stay aligned. The most dangerous thing a person can do to the demonic realm is to become transparent, to become so clear, so empty of false identity, so filled with divine presence, that there is nothing left for them to hook into. No ego to manipulate, no wound to exploit, no fear to amplify, just stillness, just truth, just light. And that level of transparency is the conclusion of all shadow work, all inner healing, all spiritual initiation. It is the moment you become the tuning fork of divine will. But let's be honest, this path is not for the faint of heart. Because before you become untouchable, you must become undone. Everything false must die. Every mask must fall. Every illusion must burn. And that process will feel like death, because it is a kind of death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of who the world told you to be. The death of the version of you that was built in reaction to pain. And demons will do everything they can to stop that death, because they know what comes after. Resurrection, rebirth, sovereignty. And they cannot survive in the presence of the resurrected. Because the resurrected human is no longer afraid of death, physical or spiritual. They've already faced it. They've already walked through hell. They've already confronted their shadows and sat with their shame and cried with their inner child. So what can a demon threaten them with? Nothing. Because they've already chosen truth over comfort. And that choice is the sword that severs every energetic cord of control. In 5D, you no longer operate through willpower, you operate through resonance. You don't push, you align. You don't force, you flow. You don't hustle, you harmonize. And in this state, everything that is meant for you finds you. Not because you chased it, but because you became a vibrational match for it. And demons, they can't find you anymore. You've moved out of their range. This is why spiritual elevation is the most powerful form of protection. Not because it makes you superior, but because it makes you invisible to distortion. You're no longer reacting to projections. You're no longer triggered by manipulation. You're no longer entangled in karmic loops. You have transcended the game. And now you are the observer, the creator, the divine witness. But don't confuse transcendence with detachment. 5D consciousness is not disconnection. It's deeper connection. Connection without codependency. Love without possession. Compassion without depletion. It's the ability to hold space for another's pain without taking it on. Or to see someone's shadow without judging it. To bless someone's path even if they're walking away from you. In that right there is mastery. And that's what demons fear most, when you no longer need to control life to feel safe within it. Ask yourself this: what would shift if I stopped reacting to darkness and started radiating light? What would change if I stopped trying to be good and started being real? What would awaken if I stopped negotiating with fear and started embodying truth? These are not questions that lead to answers. They lead to transformation. They lead to the collapse of false timelines and the activation of your divine blueprint. And once that blueprint is activated, you no longer live life, you transmit it. You become a living transmission of divine will. Your presence becomes medicine. Your words become keys. Your silence becomes sacred. And your choices become catalysts not just for you, but for everyone who enters your field. You become a walking portal, a frequency holder, a lighthouse in the middle of a storm that was never yours to begin with. This is why demons don't fear religion, or rituals, or even knowledge. They fear embodiment, because embodiment is what makes the unseen real. It's what brings heaven to earth. It's what turns theory into vibration, and vibration into transformation. It's what ends spiritual warfare not by winning it, but by rendering it obsolete. So now, here you are, awake, awake, activated. You've seen through the illusion. You've walked through the fire. You've chosen yourself. And now, the question isn't, how do I protect my energy? The question is, how do I steward this frequency? How do I walk as one who remembers, not just in moments of stillness, but in every interaction, every breath, every choice? Because the real work begins after awakening. The real mastery is in the maintenance. And the real power is not in knowing that demons fear you, it's in knowing that you no longer need to fear anything. You are the vibration they cannot enter. You are the frequency that ends their reign. You are the remembrance that rewrites the entire field. And now that you know, you never have to forget again.